All in Cooper CPAs, located in the heart of East Nashville, offer a wide variety of tax services for individuals and businesses. Contact them at 615-257-0646 and visit their website, allcooper.com, for a full list of services.
If you want to feel the wind blowing through your hair and see the great city of Nashville at the same time, check out Nashville Scooter Tours. Trekking through the downtown streets to Music Row with Nashville Scooter Tours is safe, eco-friendly, and a whole lot of fun. They use Xenon electric scooters that go 55 miles on a single charge. Find out more by calling 615-290-5563 or book your reservation today at NashvilleScooterTours.com.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Williams. And coming up next on Political Soup with Crom Carmichael and Chip Forster, Tennessee's Department of Children's Services under fire again. Can an effective repair be found amidst all the finger pointing? And just how powerful is the office of President of the United States? President Obama hints at both raising the national debt ceiling and dictating new gun laws without congressional action. Break out the saltines for a fresh hot bowl of political soup coming up next.
Jeff Meeks and Chris Austin invite you to watch your favorite sports event at the Batters Box at 43 Hermitage Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. The Batters Box offers shuttle service to all Titans home games. It's a great place for friends to gather for the game and after the game. So check out the Batters Box Bar and Grill, and thanks again for sponsoring the show. Bandwidth for today's show is brought to you by SoftLayer.com. We love SoftLayer here at Talkopolis. They are the greatest hosting company ever. They make everything easy. Check out their website at SoftLayer.com. Thanks again for sponsoring the show.
Microcasting for your city, Talkopolis.
And welcome in, everybody, to this edition of Political Soup. I'm Joe Williams, along with the stars of our show, Crom Carmichael and Chip Forster. Gentlemen, glad to have you along with us. This won't mean anything to you who are watching. We're a day early, though, because, Mr. Forster, you leave shortly for the big victory dance in D.C.
I do. I'm very much looking forward to the inaugural swearing in and then the big party that night.
Well,
Crom's not, obviously.
Silence off the floor.
I won't be there.
Guys, we've covered a lot of territory in the few weeks we've been together, but one of the things that has been an issue in our state continues to be the Department of Children's Services, who has the charge of taking care of children that the state has custody of for one reason or another, has struggled some in the past, continues to struggle, and it's at least been more public in the last few months. What's it going to take to get that group to do, I hate to say what they're supposed to, I think they're trying, but to accomplish with a great deal of success?
Well, let's put it all into context, too. The Department of Children and Family Services is having difficulties, but what's really of concern to me is the fact that children are dying. Almost 150 children have died in the custody of the department, and what's really troublesome is, where is the governor? Where is my understanding is all he has done is read a report, children are dying, and that's all he can do. And it's just something that needs to be addressed. And I'm not understanding why he hasn't stepped up and done something profound about that department.
What would be your suggestion?
Well, I think he needs to be all over it, number one. Children are dying in the care. They're losing records. Thank God that the media is asking for the open records to find out exactly what's happened. The department is saying that confidentiality requires that they not release the details while children are dying. But I think the governor should immediately put together a task force and step up and do something and be the governor instead of just letting his department continue to wallow.
Crom, another task force. Is that going to help us get anything done?
Well, I don't know. Chip and I don't disagree on the difficulties that the Department of Children's Services has. And as you pointed out in the introduction, this is not a new problem. This is a continuing problem. But just to kind of give the folks some idea of the scope of it, the Department of Children's Services gets 170,000 calls a year. They investigate 65,000 cases. And so I don't know what the number of children who have died who have been under the, quote, care of the Department of Human Services. The difficulty is so often they can't, by law, do things that are preemptive in nature because of the state laws in regard to parents' rights and families.
But they've identified some of these houses where these kids are staying where there's been at least 2 or 3 deaths in one house.
Yeah.
And the caseworkers have obviously established that these parents are not fit to have children in the home, and they're not dealing with it on an immediate basis.
Yeah, you and I aren't disagreeing on whether or not something needs to be done. The problem, though, is not a 2-year-old problem. The problem gets worse over time. Mm-hmm. And that is part of what, and that we'll continue to have this discussion on future shows, because if you want to look at it from a historical standpoint, for 50 years the problem has gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. It doesn't matter if it's a Democrat administration or a Republican administration. Chip is pointing out a problem that is perhaps larger than the norm. I don't know if it is or not. The 150 deaths, I'm not quite sure of. I saw a video of Governor Haslam and the director of the Commissioner of Children's Services with the Tennessean, mm-hmm. and in that she said that there were 31 deaths, and I don't know over what period of time.
That was last year.
Yeah, well, it was in October. It was an October interview,
right? Yeah.
And so it is a problem. But you're also dealing with that. I was amazed when I started doing research on the subject of how many calls it gets, mm-hmm. and then what the restraints are that it has that are imposed on it, and the balancing act. You have to be very careful when you release public information if in fact the child wasn't abused. Mm-hmm. So now if you release the name of that child and that child's parents and the child wasn't abused, then all of a sudden now you've essentially gone public and accused the parents of doing dastardly things, perhaps even murder, when they actually didn't do anything. It's just that in the law of large numbers, a child died, unfortunately, but not necessarily because of malicious contact of the parents. And so while I'm not going to argue over whether or not we need to address this in a better manner, boy, is it it's a big problem, right. and it's been getting bigger.
Well, there are all sorts of other issues. The department's been unable to cut the checks for the foster parents in a timely manner. The computer has crashed. There's a $4 million outlay to repair that. But I'm really just concerned about the deaths. The children are dying in the hands of foster parents who have not been properly screened, and it just doesn't seem to me that the governor has stepped up and taken the leadership role. I mean, in our society, we protect our seniors, who are least able to take care of themselves, and our children. We all can take care of ourselves, or we're supposed to be able to take care of ourselves. And for a department to be in such disarray and the governor not taking the leadership role is really disturbing to me.
Well, I mean, for his interview for the editorial board, I would disagree that the governor's not concerned in stepping up over the issue. I do think there are problems, mm-hmm. but I went back and looked at there's lawsuits that go back into 2000, and then there's all these stories about people who were under the Department of Health and Human Services prior to Governor Haslam assuming the governorship, and they were underserved or misserved or mistreated. Mm-hmm. It is a big time problem, and what I hope, Chip, what we can do over time is get to some of the root causes mm-hmm. of why the problem is 170,000 calls and 65,000 cases, and see if we can start talking about public policy that will actually reduce the number of children who need the services of the Department of Children's Services.
Well, I will say, too, that the Democratic members of the State House have called Representative Mike Turner and Sherry Jones have called for committee hearings, and Beth Harwell and the Republicans have refused to convene any committee hearings. I think that would help. A bright light on that issue with committee hearings, I think would be helpful to at least make people more aware of what's going on.
Here's my other question, gentlemen. How much of this is decades of reinventing the wheel? And what I mean by that is this. This is a service that's provided to the citizens. It should be very simple. It should be kind of like a business. You either do a good job or you don't do a good job. If you do well, you survive. Mm-hmm. And if you don't survive. However, because of it being part of state government, even if you do well, if you're not on the right side when the ballots are tallied, you're subject to be out of work, mm-hmm. especially at what I'll call at an executive level. I read one report that said 74 executives have been replaced. Mm-hmm. It happened when Governor Bredesen became governor. My question is, how often do we replace people because I can, mm-hmm. instead of I need to?
Well, there's bound to be a certain amount of that, regardless of which administration assumes power. But the point that you've made is that it's been a decades-old problem is correct, and not only is it a decades-old problem, it's a growing problem. And so I'm hoping that what we'll do in future shows is talk about some of the policy changes that we can make to reduce the size of the population that needs the services.
Right.
And that to me is, I mean, you know, Lyndon Johnson launched the war on poverty back in the 60s, and guess what? Poverty won. And there are all kinds of programs that are still in place today that I think have exacerbated the problem, made it worse, and hopefully we can address some of those and see what we can do, certainly at the state level, even if we can't get anything done at the federal level.
Well, one good thing that could happen from this is Chancellor Carol McCoy is hearing the Tennessean and the media request to open these records. And I think transparency in government, a bright light on this will help. And so I think if she rules in favor of the media to open these records up, we'll get a better idea. The Tennessean is doing great investigative work looking at the problem. More access to data will be helpful for them.
One of the things I didn't understand on that is, and I understand the privacy rules and everything that we've got to live with, but it seems pretty simple that you can say, okay, I have this many clients in this base that I serve, and yes, this many died. There's no issue of privacy there. It's simply
they lost
a number.
some of those records, though.
That's the scary part.
Right, they lost.
How do we go about? And having worked in government, I know this to be a fact. It is so easy in government to refuse to hold contractors responsible when they underdeliver, underperform, or just flat screw up. This new computer system, TFAX, I think is what they're calling it, you know, there's a $4 million piece to fix one thing. How long before somebody comes up and says, okay, you sold me this and it's junk, I want my money back?
Well, I don't know enough of the details about it, but obviously if the state or any entity pays for a computer system that's supposed to do X and it doesn't do X, then the vendor is responsible.
It's an interesting consequence of the lowest bidder getting the contract also. We see this in government, state and state government in particular, where the bid that is lowest is the one that's awarded, and you end up with you get what you pay for.
Yeah. Well, as one of the astronauts said on the second shuttle mission, you know, they strap them in and they're going into the countdown, and he looked over and said, "You realize we're riding the lowest bid." You know?
That's very scary.
It can be a frightening thing.
Well, when they write the specs, you still have to be able to deliver the specs when you bid. And I don't know what the answer is to not having a bid, because then you get into cronyism. And the unfortunate part of government, just in its nature, the people who are spending the money are not spending their own money. They're spending somebody else's money. So that's a tough balancing act between the low bid and the right vendor. It's a tough one.
One of these days I'll tell you some great stories about bidding for government. Oh man, you wouldn't believe some of the things that can go on. But that's for another day. Coming up next, more on Political Soup. Don't go far.